Good afternoon. We have arrived at the closing keynote.
Yes. Heck of a day. Seems like a lot of energy out there and a bunch of cool announcements today. But we have the main event now.
Yes. Our last conversation for the day before happy hour with two very, very special guests, Brendan Eich, the inventor of JavaScript and the founder and CEO of Brave, and Vercel's very own Guillermo Rauch. Please welcome to the stage.
Great to see you. Thank you. Brendan, welcome. All right, so we have two pioneers of the web with us here today from two different eras. And Brendan, it's kind of not fair to say, you're a pioneer of the web in every era you've been in. And I think it's just really a privilege to be on stage with you.
Thanks. Happy to be here. I feel like Treebeard in the Lord of the Two Towers. No beard, though.
Yeah, we in your intro, we left out Firefox, that they created Mozilla and Firefox too along the way. So thank you for all that you have done for the web over many generations.
So that's kind of our starting place. When you were first creating JavaScript and Mozilla and Firefox, the web was a place where servers would serve up pages that would be consumed by humans. And that is not all of web traffic these days. So we wanted to ask both of you to kind of reflect on what has happened so far now that agents are consuming a lot of web pages, and what do we still need to do in web development to account for this giant tectonic shift?
Use Vercel?
Thank you.
I think, first of all, agents are going to become even more impressive in the next few years, but ultimately it'll be humans who are forming economies, right? This is an ancient Greek word. It means home rule, more or less. It's how you run your household. And if you have a larger economy, it's still similar to that. So you have to have people producing things of value that they can trade or exchange with others. And agents might help you do that. They can help you. They could also get in the way if they're hallucinating or whatever. So I feel like we need to keep we need a humanist ethos here still, even as agents rise, in my opinion.
Yeah, the human is the driver. I think increasingly it's a collaboration between humans and agents. Right. During the keynote today, I mentioned there's human to agent interactions. There's going to be a huge part of the web that remains very human-centric. I use deep search style features with agents all the time, but I still want to go to the source. I still want to understand where this information is coming from. Yeah. So that's, I think, a big part of the future of the web is the web, but it's a better web.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a great, we were talking in preparation before this about search grounding. This was a new concept to me. Probably not new for many of you, but
it's actually a great inside baseball moment where we're both, David and I are taking this call on different sides of a lobby. We both have our phones and we're like nodding. And Brendan keeps bringing up search grounding, and I see David typing in search grounding.
I was a human needing to go. Yeah.
What is search grounding?
Yes. Maybe to set the stage for this, tell us what search grounding is.
Yeah. So agents fundamentally use tools, right? Our CTO likes to say that an agent is just a function. It's an LLM that calls tools and brings back results. I think the most important tool that an agent has today, whether you realize it or not, is searching the web. We call that search grounding. The tool is, all right, I'm going to make a search on behalf of this person. I'm going to process the results, and I'm going to give you a summary. I may give you a table. I may give you a generative UI. I may give you a really nice representation that sort of aggregates all that data. And I believe this is one of the fundamental interfaces of the future, right? The agent did the search for us. And increasingly, what's really nice to see is that, Google, of course, has a role to play there. So if you've been optimizing your SEO for Google, it still matters a lot because Gemini will be using Google. ChatGPT seems to be using Bing. But still, the search rankings, the SEO is very important. But increasingly, the rest of the world is using Brave Search. So maybe you can tell us more about.
Yes, I kind of did browsers as a way of doing search. That wasn't my intention, but they're two sides of one coin. And at Mozilla, we learned this by being the browser for Google Search. We did a famous deal where Firefox got a revenue share for making Google Search the default. And that was a year after Safari did its famous deal with Google. But Mozilla didn't have a search engine. And over time, this meant that Mozilla was going to lose somehow, that Chrome would come out, and even if Google tried to keep Firefox healthy, Chrome would probably just do better because it had more marketing behind it. So with Brave, I always intended to avoid that trap. I didn't know if I could do it, and we ended up acquiring a team I knew from Germany. We was doing something called Tailcat, and that became Brave Search. And now we're using that to make an API business that provides real-time search grounding to almost every LLM creator on the planet, except for Google and Microsoft.
And so technically, what exchange is happening when an LLM is using you for search grounding? Like, what is the job to be done that you are helping the LLM with?
So the API is a lot like humans doing queries, but it's prompts, and you get back results with snippets. There's all sorts of nasty competition in this space, like some up-and-comers either are scraping or they're using VC money to collect the entire page and provide the fetched page, which is a huge copyright hazard. We don't do that. So copyright law is catching up here. There was a result just yesterday or today with Anthropic that is partial progress in my view, but the story is not over by a long shot.
Is Claude using Brave Search?
If you look in the Anthropic list of GDPR processors, we are at the very bottom, but
Can't confirm
I
nor deny.
can't say otherwise because we're...
I think I'm supposed to prevent this question from coming up.
Yeah. Either way, let's say Brave Search is important for search grounding for.
Yeah, and you mentioned the hallucinations, and something I do find really interesting is that I'm not going to say hallucinations is a solved problem, but there's been an excitement over transitioning from calling it prompt engineering to context engineering. It seems like if you don't give the LLM context, bets are off. It could hallucinate. It could give you stale data. But the more context it gets, the smarter it gets. And I think the web, as part of that context, is going to be the thing that really moves the needle. So grounding and search is one of those really powerful things that battle a lot of the bad parts of LLMs. The other thing that I find really exciting is that agents can parallelize and leverage the web at a rate that human beings cannot even get close to, right? So when I do my own research, when I use V0, the equivalent time that would take me to browse the web manually, it's just, the difference is astonishing. A lot of the programming workflow was, not to oversimplify, but you would go to your code editor, you would get an exception, you would literally copy and paste the error, paste it into Google, end up in Stack Overflow,
yeah.
and then copy back some slop back into your text editor. Now the LLMs can copy and paste the slop for us. So the productivity gains are gigantic.
Yeah. Somebody said, was it Curly? I don't remember what company it was, leaked all their prompt prelude. And a reply on X said, is everything slop now?
But if you ground it on search, quality increases. So
it is kind of weird, just reflecting on it, like, since all these web pages were written for human consumption, and that artifact, that web page, is the thing that we've stuck all of our agents loose on to go and consume, that is not the most efficient format for an agent to go and consume.
Correct.
Do you think it's a runaway train, and that's just going to happen forever, and we're generating these incredibly rich web pages meant to be served to humans, and AI is consuming them, or are we going to move to a more efficient data exchange?
That's an amazing question. We actually published research on the ability for these different agents to run JavaScript. So if your client rendering your page, a lot of them miss your content.
Yep.
So for many years, we've been advocating for, if you want to make that first impression really good, both for users and crawlers, you want to server render your content. But to your point, even that might arguably not be enough, because whether the markup is useful to the agent is still sort of yet to be determined. There's new standards that are emerging on the internet, one of them being LLMs.txt, right? So realistically, what the model really wants is pure signal. if you can just give me the raw data, give me the raw content, and it'll use fewer tokens, so it helps with cost efficiency as well.
I mean, div is not useful.
Exactly. It's like a diss on React developers, so well played.
It's also, there's NL Web from Microsoft, from my friend Guha, who jumped to Microsoft after a brief time at OpenAI. And that's like a new metadata standard, like schema.org, but for sites to do their own models, so they don't have to just be erased by OpenAI. I tweeted recently the scene from The Matrix early on where Mr. Anderson's dragged to the little windowless room, and I said, this is what big AI wants us to be, just trapped by an agent, and if we get out of line, it erases our mouth.
Yeah.
That's not the web. That's
right.
That's dystopia in my view.
So in some ways, I see this pattern of what's old is new, which for a neckbeard Unix person is really good news. So .txt is much how the internet started. Yeah. You know, low bandwidth. So what can you get? What can you create a BBS for, a FTP for, Gopher protocol, TXT, right? So there is a little bit of a return to like, let's create the most optimal front end for each type of consumer. So for the agent, it might be more simplistic. MCP is emerging almost as the new HTTP. Is this idea of like tool calling over the network. Yep. So I think what's fascinating to see is the evolution of the internet protocol stack for this world in which it's going to be agents plus humans collaborating on not just code, but any kind of operation.
It has to happen. We had this problem with certain PWAs, including X, where it was hard to figure out from the JavaScript what the local Leo AI could parse. And we ended up at one point trying OCR using one of Anthropic's computer vision models.
To understand the page that X had rendered.
The text in the page, yeah.
You know, it's a big analog to digital to analog to digital to analog to digital conversion problem when you're OCRing a web page to try to understand what is on the web page. Like, we need a better format.
I don't know, on my iPhone, I take pictures of text, and then I can copy the text out. OCR is immortal.
Precision.
The success of screenshots, like 80% of my phone photos library is screenshots. So that kind of gives you a sense of like, the AIs will continue to deal with anything. Any kind of modality, they'll be able to process. We had the browser-based CEO today on a panel speaking about, agents will also just really boot up a browser and use the web as it exists today. So even if the protocol stack was fixed and static and website owners didn't offer new modalities, we'll have agents drive the web browser. We'll have agents drive the computer. And we'll have local agents running inside the browser as well. So it's basically agents everywhere and AI everywhere.
Let's talk about where traffic comes from. I'm going to hard left us for a minute.
Great.
Guillermo, you tweeted something kind of astonishing. Can I still say tweeted? You posted on X.
I've been using the new form Z'd.
I was going to go to the same place. So
okay, great.
You Z'd it.
That ChatGPT now refers 10% of Vercel signups. A month before that, it was 4.8%, and 6% and 6 months before that, it was less than 1%. So in 6 months, you went from 1% to 10%.
Yep, and it continues to grow very fast.
That is insane.
Yeah.
I mean, play this out. Is all of consumer discovery going to move to AI instead of through search engines? How fast is this shift happening? How else can we contextualize this shift?
Yeah. To start, we haven't even agreed on what the word is. Some people are saying LLM engine optimization, LEO. Some people are saying generative engine optimization. So that's a human's concerns. Tabs versus spaces, LEO versus SEO. But the key point there is fundamentally ChatGPT, people are asking questions. Where should I deploy my React app? How can I solve this problem with Next.js? And ChatGPT is aggregating search results, combining it with its pre-existing world model. When it's trained, pre-trained and post-trained, it's like, a kid growing up that is learning about the world. And it's like, oh, this is a chair. Okay, that's a deployment platform. Oh, it seems pretty sweet for web applications, right? But then you have to have content that gets layered on top through search engines. And then the LLM will, the engine here, the generative engine, will produce the answer for the end user. What we've been noticing is, well, first of all, there was a big jump when ChatGPT started automatically searching the web. If you remember when they started out with their search experiment, it was almost like a different product. What I think is really fascinating is this blend of you can create a haiku, but you can also ask something about the real world, and it'll go and search the web. So there was a big jump associated with that. But the other thing that we've noticed that I mentioned in one of my Zeets is that this traffic that's coming is highly intentful. So it does speak to this idea of that context, guiding the customer, guiding the user better.
Yeah.
And whether it's ChatGPT or new interfaces, I do think this is a relevant takeaway. We're getting people to the truth, obviously because ChatGPT is recommending Vercel, say it's the absolute truth, but it is directing people to what they actually wanted to do. I think there was a lot of the web browsing that was very much window shopping. You search for something, you click, and you're like not even sure what this thing is. Whereas we're getting traffic that says, no, you are looking to deploy this MCP server. Go here.
So the average.
Are you saying conversions that you're seeing from ChatGPT traffic are higher?
Much higher.
Than search traffic?
Much higher.
Which makes sense because if you think about it, people think about any prompt that you're typing into a chatbot. It's 4 or 5 times longer than the number of keywords you would search in Google. So you're giving the engine way more information about your specific need than you would ever give a search.
That's right.
Wow.
So Google, when they started doing summaries in the search engine result page, I think they did what we did in Brave Search from the start, which was to footnote them to link to real pages, because people need to check for errors, hallucinations, and so on. And there's a real legal threat from publishers who are getting their traffic destroyed, right? They do want you to go read the full long-form article. Maybe you don't need to read it all. You want a quick answer, a summary is enough. But there are lots of cases where you need to get into the depths of it, and that's where the depth of the web is much better than that little room in the matrix, which is where ChatGPT wants you to stay with some scary agent. I think we have to find a new model for not just GEO, but the economics of the web, which has been heavily based on search ads. Search ads are so powerful because they're based on intent. They're very e-commerce friendly, very monetizable. They're not like brand campaigns that have to be refreshed. People get tired of them, they get blind to them. The buyers of search ads are just always coming back for more as long as they're in business.
Yeah. I was going to ask about this. I mean, we're Sunday night, Monday morning, we're about to release the first part of our Google series. Acquired is about to embark on covering.
Spoilers! There's like 1,000
These are
streaming on the internet.
Among friends.
Heard it here first.
And one of my takeaways from doing this is like, yes, this is a wrong, false statement, but you can kind of round the business model of the web to page search. Like, you squint your eyes, you can round enough. This is both completely disintermediating that and dialing up intent.
That's fascinating, right? It's removing a lot of misclicks that you could have. You could literally be led down the wrong path if you just stick to keywords because there's not enough context.
And there's SEO garbage, and
That's right.
Google cross-promoting its own stuff.
I think the
Blue link 1,
gamification.
back. Blue link 2, scroll. Nope, back. Blue link 3, nope. And then this paradigm doesn't have that.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't have a business model.
Web developers will remember the famous W3 Schools results. So there was this company that had massively optimized their SEO for web API documentation.
Yeah.
But no developer that I ever talked to had said, yeah, that's the one I want. They all wanted to go to Mozilla Developer Network, MDN. That was more authoritative, no ads, beautiful, but Google just kept sending you there. And so there has been a problem with cheating the search results. There's been a problem with ads sandwiching the page. So there's definitely a threat to that version of the web, right? The one that's 10 blue links, but now there's an emergence of a new web. So the weather company was talking about today, well, they have an MCP server. So there's weather.com, but they can also run the MCP front end, so to speak. And then that is data that gets integrated into any agentic experience. So there's a web of agents and a web of humans. And I think we'll be navigating how each one grows.
Are they charging for that?
Yes.
Are they able to cover their costs?
That's right.
Yeah. The other thing the web missed besides economics is micro royalties. I would think that's where the copyright threat is still out there. But micro payments didn't happen either. So it really was, like you said, it was Google search ads sort of, first of all, doing a good thing, I think, helping a lot of sites make money, and then eating the world.
Yeah. the micropayment for agents might become more plausible than the micropayment for humans.
Yes.
Because the transaction costs for humans are just like overwhelming.
Yep.
But agents, they just keep ledgers.
Yeah, we had this realization in recording the Google episode that, especially once AdSense launched, as a publisher now, you can just make content and make money.
Right.
Yeah, there needs to be an equivalent for an incentive to make content, abstract away the business. and make
MCP
money.
sense or something
Yes.
like that. Yeah.
MCP sense. Ooh, I like
Yeah,
that.
MCP sense. Yeah, exactly.
The other big thing that doesn't get talked about enough, I think, is the fact that scraping, accessing these workloads has real costs, right? If you have, I'll give a couple examples. Like we noticed anomalies on our network where there was heightened activity from training bots, right? They were trying to acquire data from all over the internet. Sometimes folks were vastly passing Googlebot. Googlebot, you called it a supercomputer earlier. Imagine just the monumental resources that you have to put towards crawling for training purposes in order to pass Google. And so a lot of the tooling that we've been building at Vercel, we talked about today, is first, how do you understand who's using your website? By understanding who's using your website, you can make economically sound decisions. For some publishers, it might make sense that they get crawled. And for example, Next.js documentation. Next.js is an open standard of the web, right? It's an open source project. We want every single LLM on the planet to just ingest every possible token. But to your point, a publisher that is already pressed for margins, or a publisher that was optimized for a former past economic model, whether you let ByteDance crawl your website at an astonishing rate is a decision that you need to make, and want to give you all the tools to make the best possible decision for your business.
Yeah, do you do behavioral modeling of bots and try to get them?
Bot IDs are one of our first investments in that direction of giving you something that is more on the realm of using AI in traffic patterns to understand, is this a human or is this a bot? And a lot of it is also based on the fact that we have verified bots, right? So we know that it's surprising how much cheating there is on the internet, because Googlebot is like a very important word. It's the lifeline of your business for a lot of people, right? So a lot of firewall rules got created to say, Googlebot, of course we have to let them in.
Come on in, yeah.
But now you have some random IP in Russia claiming to be Googlebot, and a lot of legacy firewalls and solutions just let them through.
I'll tell you a secret. Bing and Brave Search also have to use Googlebot in the user agent, or we will get blocked too.
But we can say, this is Googlebot on behalf of Brave, and this is Googlebot on behalf of real Google, and we let those through. But again, there's increasing complexity in understanding who's the other person on the other side that's accessing my workload, and am I going to devote the resources to serve them?
One more question here while we're in the world of traffic. Brendan, you sit in a very interesting place to observe through Brave Search, people's search behavior, and then through your grounding agreements with LLM providers, the volume of people using AI, sort of for the same purpose. A little bit different, but I have intent, I want to know or do something. I either need to search for it or use AI for it. Do you have any numbers to describe the shift in consumer behavior over the last year that you'd be willing to share?
It's a good question. First of all, we don't profile users. We're a private search engine, so we don't build a user profile. Each query is unlinkable from subsequent ones. We drop the IP, and that's true of the Search API as well. But Search API has taken off, so it's like half of our human search engine now. And it's probably growing faster, though you have to worry about the AI hype cycle topping out or some shift happening. But yeah, it's growing faster.
Fascinating.
We have a section we want to talk about in here about JavaScript, of course. I hadn't quite thought about this till preparing for now. Because JavaScript was so successful and so popular and adopted by the web and is all over the web, there might be more training data available for JavaScript programming than any other programming language in the world. It's certainly up there. How do you feel about JavaScript being written by AI these days?
So JavaScript is like 30 this year, and the trademark deal was done in December, but I did the work in May. for the original engine. So I think it's time for it to get the hell out of my house.
What, ECMAScript wasn't catchy enough for you?
Oh, that was a later name. LiveScript was the marketing name in Netscape in August or September of 1995, and before that it was Mocha, which Mark Andreessen coined, but then the business guys didn't like it, and they said, oh, there's something else in software called Mocha, we can't do it. So yeah, JavaScript was the original goal of a lot of the executives who wanted to have the kid brother language to Java, and Java was going to be the huge language that was going to change the web, and Java plus Netscape kills Windows. Mark Andreessen said that once. And then at the end of 1995, a Microsoft board member said, well, you've waved the red cape in the bull's face, now you're getting the horns. And sure enough, Netscape got pretty much killed. But yeah, JavaScript was not a great name, so it's JS to me, and that's what I always use in JSConf AR of sainted memory. Whatever you call it, is it popular? It was not originally, and there were a lot of people out there still mad about it, but it's sort of like a successful, trait. Like if you can resist malaria, you get certain variations in genes, and it's not always perfect. I told this to Lex Fridman, sometimes both parents give you that allele, and you get sickle cell anemia, which is a serious disease. But if you only get one of them, your blood cells are a little bit flatter, and they don't get the malaria. So, JavaScript, it's what you need.
It is really insane. JavaScript was this scripting language that was embedded in documents in web pages, and then people figured out the insanity, the true magic and hackiness of early Ajax to build actual web applications using JavaScript, and now Guillermo and friends are using it to build AI agents. That has to be strange that it's the same.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where by getting on first, even though it was only available in the page, I didn't have script source equal until Netscape 3 in '96. It was a crazy idea because normally stuff in plain text will be rendered as some kind of text, and if it's got angle pointy tags around it, there'll maybe be some change to the formatting, but it's still going to get rendered. You don't want to see your code at all. So I had to figure out a way to hide the code and yet make old browsers not choke on it. That was a bit of work. But eventually we got all the variations you needed, like XML, HTTP request, and people went crazy with it. Even in the old days, before XHR, you could have a background frame or form and you submit it. And people were doing asynchronous programming even in '96.
Yeah, and in the wave of what's old is new, one of the fascinating things that we've seen is that LLMs not only love to write JavaScript, they're in some ways changing or evolving the best practices of programming languages. One example that I'd like to give is when V0 generates code, people point out that the design looks really nice. It's very accurate. It can transform a screenshot into working software. It can transform Figma into working software. Increasingly, it's how the software works, how fast it loads, and what it looks like that is taking priority. When JavaScript came out, it was embedded inside a web page. And then developers said, well, that looks like a bad practice. We should start moving things around. We should create beautiful abstractions. What's happening with LLMs is that increasingly the code is just the output. And the LLM will use what gets the job done. Obviously, there is influence, there is post-training, there is context, etc. But I share your point in that JavaScript has succeeded in many ways due to its immense popularity. It seems that popularity is intensifying further because there's so much training data, so much preference data of what JavaScript is.
As humans might write JavaScript less and less, more and more JavaScript is going to be out there.
Agents heart JavaScript, let's face it. The agents are going to be running agent.jsconf.
But I'm curious what you would say about like agentic-oriented programming languages, right? People do say when TypeScript is in there, when the type information is in there, then again, context rules everything around me, right? Like the LLM now produces even better code. So I'm curious about like, what in your dreams would be the ideal stack for vibe coding or agentic engineering?
I always thought static and dynamic types are the best of both worlds, and you should be able to infer types, not have to write them down for every last variable, which Java made you do. But all the big JavaScript engines and a lot of systems infer types anyway. So I think if we sink that cost, if the agents can do it, we may not need to add types to JavaScript. But there is a chance that there'll be some kind of pluggable type system standard out of ECMA, TC39, someday. I'm not working on it anymore, but there's a group of a cohort in that technical committee that wants to do it. So
yeah, it's fascinating because a lot of what's made developers feel like some code is overwhelming or not is this idea of like, what does it look like? Well, do I need to add more characters here? How do I align my code? How do I format it, right? But agents will not care about those things.
They'll have new embeddings, and they'll just have this blind process of finding the best way to express themselves, and it could change JavaScript for the better, actually. We don't need to make every last programmer happy if it doesn't look like the blub language, Paul Graham's term, right?
That's right.
JavaScript doesn't have to please everybody, but it will have to please agents.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about open versus closed ecosystems. Brendan, you basically made a career out of trying to make the web a more open place. And Guillermo, you recently sort of described the AI SDK for Vercel as a way to try to remove lock-in from the world of AI. Lock-in has sort of existed in every previous generation of technology, and you want to sort of create an abstraction layer to make it not exist in this one. Can each of you talk a little bit about when closed ecosystems win, why, and when open ecosystems win, why, and what we can learn from previous technology generations?
I'll start with the AI SDK, which for us at Vercel, I think is one of the most consequential projects we've ever worked on, because it's very clear that the future of humanity will be one in which AI plays a fundamental role. And I am personally, against this idea that there's going to be one AI to rule them all, one matrix to rule them, like we all plug in into ChatGPT. And so I think we have to fight back that centralization pressure. That was, in many ways, rightfully earned. ChatGPT was early. Their API was quite well designed. There's a bunch of, there's an awesome Levels.io thread in which he talks about how easy it is, or it was at the time, to get an OpenAI key and start coding. So I always come back to developer experience. If it's really easy to start with the AI SDK, actually arguably easier than with all of the different model SDKs that you need to learn, et cetera, that's going to be a really positive force for the world. The other one is, if the adapters are pluggable, then everybody can participate in building an ecosystem around AI, also very good for the world. With Vercel's AI Gateway, we're hoping to sort of create like the CDN for models, where we can do failover optimization. So there are a lot of mirrors of the Internet of Pages and the Internet of Tokens. Like history is different, rhymes, etc. Now, to your question about closed versus open and one, why wins and the other, closed, like Apple, right? Like quality. Developer experience, well, maybe not so much for Apple, but there,
originally.
Again, full stack integration is a huge benefit. Like things need to work well together. One of the big principles of the AI SDK is we can't ship a lossy abstraction. It can't be that because you want to be open and free, etc., you now have a worse product. So I think product quality still rules everything around me. This is true for all of your future AI innovations. Quality is so important. We have to fight back slop. So
I watched Steve Jobs' keynote introducing the iPhone in 2007.
In person?
Were you there?
No, I wasn't there, but I watch it on YouTube every year. It's because he's a brilliant presenter, of course, and he's talking about really phone messaging and the web, and he is doing something based on open stuff like KHTML, which became WebKit, but it wouldn't have happened without the closed aspect of Apple. The team that worked in secret, they had to figure out how to take the rendered web page onto a texture on a fairly primitive GPU by today's standards, and you could touch it and drag it around in a separate thread without going through the main event loop. All that stuff was closed. So I see closed as how a lot of great software gets done quickly with top talent. I also see monopolies go closed when it suits them, and then it just turns into trash. It's not even slop, it's just garbage. And then they die eventually, or they become a 100-year company like General Electric, and a tax cheat and a subprime lender. You don't want to. If Google does that, I wouldn't be surprised, but no offense to them. But what we really need for things to be open and healthy is an ecosystem, and an ecosystem has different critters that help each other as well as eat each other. There has to be mutualism. There has to be a breadth to it. And I think that ecosystem thinking needs to come to agents. We need that.
I'm very excited about MCPs for this reason, right? It's hard sometimes to explain to the widest of audiences, why MCPs are so important. But I think the fact that there are these integration systems for AIs that share the value creation with everybody. If you have your own interface to plug into this massively growing ecosystem, then there is upside for everybody. So I think the fact...
New cross-site scripting threats all the time, too. Okay.
And new kinds of vulnerabilities, by the way. There's been already... Most MCP servers, paradoxically, are local, which means potentially untrusted code execution on your machine, data exfiltration. There's a whole slew of concerns, right? But I think I'm really optimistic that AI seems to actually be developing in a way that's going to be open. AI SDK, the MCP protocol that Anthropic sort of coined, things seem to be headed the way of the web. I think we should also strive to not repeat mistakes of the web, right? Things that ended up going sideways in terms of maybe monopolies that are, not
XML, no.
XML and a bunch of other XSLT.
Can I ask a little bit of an implementation detail? So about Vercel's AI SDK, many times in the past, I'll date myself. In 2009, I was developing iPhone apps, and I was trying to decide, should I use Objective-C and do it all in Xcode, or should I look for one of these beautiful write once, run everywhere solutions that magically ports my code to Android and any other developing mobile platforms at the time? And of course, it was trash whenever it got recompiled into some other thing. How do you handle the cases where, each of these model providers actually does have different functionality, and so how do you design it in a way that's not just a subset of the least common denominator and accommodate the nuances of each model that you're sort of abstracting underneath?
Actually, we owe a lot of that to TypeScript, not to this on JavaScript. But the adapter system is built in such a way that it basically gives you best of both worlds. The type annotations, self-documentation nature of the system, and the ability for each adapter to express their own functionality. So we collaborate with the model providers on building those SDKs. Many times when a new model or model capability is dropping, they give us early access. They tell us because it's very important to them that we have day one support of their new capabilities. And for example, search grounding started out as sort of an exotic experiment of some of the model providers, and now it's becoming more common. So it's this really fast-paced research and development cycles that then reach more stabilization. So I think it's a back and forth. So very short term, you might be attracted to a particular frontier capability of a certain model. And then you'll see that a couple months later, if it's really good, if it has product market fit, a lot of LLMs have it. So it depends on where you are in your appetite for cutting edge capabilities. Yep. If you're an enterprise that wants stable functionality, it's actually in your best interest to wait for that sort of game theory to play out where models stabilize in capabilities, but you still retain your options open, essentially.
It's amazing that we've already seen in the short lifespan of AI, November 22 was the ChatGPT moment. There have already been things that have obviously worked and been copied, and I'm thinking deep research, or the video models, or things where suddenly every company has it within the year. And there's been things that have had no product market fit and are abandoned. I'm thinking of the ChatGPT App Store or GPT.
You could argue that GPTs, in some ways, is being superseded by MCPs. So, GPTs was kind of a closed ecosystem. They moved really fast. They came up with this store and whatnot. But both consumers and companies seem to have, we'll try it, whatever. But now MCP is gaining a lot more traction.
So if you're like DeepSeek, much less pre-training budget, much more on the go. That's the future. Models are changing so fast, it would be insane to try to ban Skynet by controlling them or designate OpenAI as the one-time forever winner because they were already embarrassed by DeepSeek. And this is accelerating, in my view. It needs to continue. But one thing you said earlier was striking, and that's that if you chase the most refined design for a given hardware device, let's say, you can make something in Flash in 2005 that looks really great. It's like a game almost. But then the iPhone comes out, and suddenly everything has to fit on mobile, and you want what became responsive design. And in some ways, it looks simpler. Maybe it's too flat. I like gradients. But still, that can be more winning and more useful to more people than your fancy little pixel clicker that you could be chasing that's last year's model. And I've seen this over and over with UX. So I think design and DX, developer experience, are always going to matter because there's always going to be new form factors.
Yeah, you have to get developer adoption. The thing that's been fascinating about JavaScript and TypeScript is that they are actually the lingua franca of AI engineering. So the initial conception of models happens in the Python world. Before we called AI, it was machine learning.
Just sitting there in Python notebooks. Yeah.
And that was all Python. In fact, the front end to most models were a Python notebook. You're not going to get massive consumer adoption with a Python notebook. So that,
which is, it's so funny, that era, that 2010s era, it was like you have a data science team whose code never reaches production and they're in Python notebooks all day. And then you have like the real engineering team who are in the IDE and like occasionally they would heave some terrible code over the wall. Right. But like no data scientists were ever actually in the production environment. It's amazing that that has basically completely gone away.
Yeah, so I argue that this rise of the AI engineer is predicated on the fact that we have to actually create utility for the tech. We can't just get caught up in like, it's cool tech. It needs to have a great utility, it has to have a great interface, and that's the power is in the hands of people that are using the AI SDK, JavaScript and TypeScript developers. They're creating the connective tissue into the models. And those will continue, I think, for a long time to be, hardcore Python. Maybe Rust will have a role to play. A lot of the legacy of Mozilla and Brendan continues to have incredible impact.
All I got was T-shirts.
We made it 39 minutes before Rust came up.
Yeah,
that's right.
Nice. Well, before our last question about the future of the web and where all this is going, one other area I wanted to ask both of you, but particularly Guillermo, is just, as all these shifts have been happening over the last year, what has your infrastructure looked like? I mean, a year ago, you were a front-end cloud. Today, you're a lot more than that. Like, what has this just meant for the back end of Vercel?
Yeah, a lot of it has been proving out to ourselves first that this AI thing can create tremendous utility, right? So it has to transform into real-world outcomes and products. So we created V0 because we had the hypothesis of these LLMs seem to be pretty darn good at creating web apps, at writing JavaScript, at writing Tailwind, etc. It turned out to be a really good bet. 100 million generations later, we're saying, look, this is what a lot of the future of the web will look like. It's agentic. It uses AI models. It streams data. It might take long to think. So it resulted in tremendous changes to the infrastructure. A lot of it, I think, we benefited from being in the right place at the right time. We bet on JavaScript, always bet on JavaScript. And so the AI SDK was such a natural extension of our core competence and frankly, our core nerd gravitas. Like it was just right there. Let's create a framework for AI apps and agents. So that was very natural. We'd also been working on streaming capabilities, but frankly, not for AI. We were working on it for e-commerce websites. The thing that makes Amazon.com so fast is that when you go to a product page, they flush the hero of the page really fast, and then they continue to stream the content. So we've been working on investments into our compute infrastructure for streaming, inspired by Google, Amazon, Meta, etc. So we were able to repurpose a lot of that engineering into what Fluid has become today, which is an ideal, I call it sort of the CPU to the GPU. The CPU is still incredibly important because it's processing the application code. So now Vercel can host MCP servers, it can stream UIs like V0. And so on the AI cloud side of the house, we're very optimistic that there's going to be millions of other V0s. You're seeing it every day. There's a new kind of agentic capability for building what I call any kind of output or artifact. Depending on what domain you're in today, it's very likely that an agent can help you produce that thing that the user wants much faster. The human is in the loop, but the process of creating that thing will go more and more and more towards agents. So the infrastructure change has been quite dramatic, I'd say. There's a lot of parallels. So I called it AI Gateway is an infrastructure product that you can think of as a CDN. So the fact that Vercel had been investing in a CDN for so long, okay, now we have the CDN of AI. We had compute for web pages. Now we have compute for tokens. So a lot of these are natural extensions of the company, and I'm just so excited that folks can now create the future generation of applications on the same platform.
How about for Brave
So if I go farther out, there's an old problem in the web that the web archive, the way that machine only partially solves, that if you don't have that old database running still, that MySQL or that Ruby on Rails or whatever, the page doesn't work right, and it's gone, right? This killed one of the wikis we were using for JavaScript standards work, DocuWiki, and I still mourn it because it was a useful wiki. Nobody's running the server side. Maybe with the rise of agents, we will get to a web that has permanent memory, and we can get back to any point in time. We can run old versions of the server and the client. We can stream everything. We can have more symmetry between the client and the server, more peer-to-peer equality. That would be, I think, better for lots of reasons, but it's always been, let's go make a new thing. Let's go make some kind of new super web or new startup. And it never will replace the web. The web has to evolve. And so as long as the web's evolving and agents are helping humans to make it better, I think we have a shot at this. Always bet on JavaScript.
Well, as a last question for both of you to wrap it up, I feel like we've been talking about this all along, but to predict a little bit, 5 years from now, what does the web look like?
Geez, even 3 years. It's hard to.
Yeah. Okay, we'll scope it down to 3.
Yeah, frankly, it's hard to even predict out the next
3
month.
months.
A lot of what we share today is, look, we're building V0. We're partnering with some of the best customers in AI that are building their own agents and interfaces. We're learning as we go. We have to be extremely quick on our feet, right? My biggest prediction is this kind of meta prediction of, look, everybody can cook. It's one of our new memes, so to speak, right?
I see it on the billboard in Guerrero. In, San Francisco.
We even have it right there. Everybody can cook. I'm just excited that the web was meant to be read-write.
Yes.
When I fell in love with Firefox, it was because of the developer tools. It was because they had really amazing support for logging. It was basic, but it's better than every other web browser. And so I want a web where everybody can not just publish in the form of like, I go to one platform and I publish my little contribution of metadata, but really a web where there's far more creators. Someone asked me today, how many people do you estimate will be creating with V0? And I said, look, at least as many as they can speak, at least as many as are in a chat software today, talking to PMs, designers, etc. All of that potential energy of the world can now be devoted to real creation of software, ideas, images, videos. So I think it's going to be a web of creators. Again, what's old is new. This was the original spirit of the internet, not to have 2 or 3 websites that dominate everything. So.
Amen. I think 5 years is a long time. I don't know if we'll have the Google search engine result page, but search is still going to be useful, but a lot of the contents will be footnoted or they'll be streamed in a different presentation. That's fine. What I'm struck by is if you look at the super hackers of note, like I retweeted something from my old friend Steve Yegi. He's got 5 different agents doing stuff for him that makes him 5 times stronger. Or what's his name, Yassine, or whoever Elon fired recently, he's using 10, right? You see these hack vibe coding parties for teenagers, and they're doing crazy stuff. Just take that and exponentiate it for a couple of years. It's going to be much richer and more demotic. Everyone who thought they might have to go to school and learn how to program, they're going to be talking to agents and standing up amazing stuff.
Yes.
Amen. Well, thank you to both of you for an incredible conversation. 2 pioneers of the web in the past and pioneers of the web going forward.
Thank you.
This has been awesome. And thank you to all of you for being here for Vercel Ship.